German extermination of ethnic Poles in World War II. The case of Józef, in English Józef, Fijałkowski. Auschwitz Prisoner No. 3088. Presented by Maria Szonert Binienda, Juris Doctor. Józef Fijałkowski was born in 1911 in Koło, near Poznań. In 1937, he began his study at the University of Warsaw School of Law. As a student, he met in Warsaw a much younger girl named Danuta Karpowicz and fell in love with her. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland and began conducting mass extermination of the Polish civilian population all over Poland. The University of Warsaw did not open that year, so Józef could not continue his education. Despite the barbaric violence around, Józef and Danuta got married in Warsaw in June of 1940. Less than 2 months after the wedding, Józef was caught up in the massive sudden roundup while going out in the morning to buy fresh pastry for breakfast. Together with over 1,000 civilian men rounded up that day on the streets of Warsaw by the Germans, Józef was shipped directly to the Auschwitz death and concentration camp. While passing through the Auschwitz gate, Józef was heavily beaten and injured his leg. A high-ranking SS man addressed the Warsaw transport. Holding a big whip, he jumped over the turned-up barrel, called for the translator and shouted, "This is the concentration camp. No one will get out alive from here. You Poles, remember, you don't have your Poland anymore. Your homeland is behind these barbed wires now. For us, the Germans, you are not human beings. You are just mere dunghills. You are the enemies of the Reich. There is no pity for those like you. Forget about your wives, children, and families. You will die here like animals. You have no more than 3 months to live. Understand?" The Warsaw transport that arrived in Auschwitz on August 15, 1940, consisted of 1,153 civilian men caught on the streets of Warsaw and 513 political prisoners from the Warsaw Heavy Security Prison known as Pawiak. The prisoners from Pawiak consisted of political and religious leaders, activists, lawyers, doctors, and officers of the Polish army. Soon after their arrival, a group of older men was selected to push a huge ram roller, forcing them to level the main square of the camp. A German criminal named Krankenman stood at the shaft of the roller, hitting the swaying man in front of him with a long riding crop. One of the men fell. Krankenman cheered, forcing the others ahead. The man on the ground was slowly pressed down and run over by the roller. For the first anniversary of the German invasion of Poland, the deputy commander announced that from now on, all camp activities should be performed not by walking, but by running. That day there was no end to the sadistic tormenting. The prisoners, like animals in training, kept jumping, running, turning around, rolling, and hopping. Some were climbing the trees, while the oppressors were pursuing them with sticks and riding crabs. The deputy commander was walking from one group to another, inciting the oppressors in their rage. People were falling like flies. 7 dozens of heavily beaten bodies had to be removed from the yard after this rage by those who withstood the ordeal. This task had to be performed by running, of course. One day, the black man brought a big blackboard and special forms on which the prisoners could write their first letters home. He then printed the pre-approved text on the blackboard. The text, written in German, was as follows: Dear so-and-so, I want to let you know that I am in the concentration camp Auschwitz. I'm healthy and fine. I hope you are healthy and fine too. In the camp, we have a shop in which we can buy food and cigarettes. The healthy, sick, and the dying had the right to write such a letter home. Subsequently, prisoners were allowed to write letters home once a month. The letters had to be written in German and were heavily censored. In her first reply to Józef, Danuta wrote, My dearest Józef, I have just received the first letter from you. We all are very happy that you are in good health. I already wrote to your mother and sister in Koło. I will write to them again today. We all are in good health and miss you very much. I also want to let you know that I am pregnant. Love, Danusia. In May of 1941, Danusia gave birth to a healthy boy and named him Andrew, nicknamed Jędruś. She immediately wrote to Józef about the birth of his son Andrew. Józef replied, My dearest wife, thank you so much for your letter. I was awaiting this letter so impatiently and for so long. I'm very happy that you are fine. I cannot even tell you how happy I am that God gave us a big and healthy son. In your next letter, please describe his cradle. You don't realize how much your letters mean to me. I think about you and Jędruś day and night, and I'm still hoping to come home soon. Your letters give me hope and courage. I work every day and I'm well, thank God. In His hands lies everything. Danusia desperately wanted to show her charming Jędruś to his father. Thus, she wrote to the Auschwitz camp commandant asking him for permission to send a photograph of the newly born baby to his father. In August 1941, Józef was informed that his wife had requested permission to send him a photograph of his newly born son. But through a special order, Hitler personally forbade any pictures in the concentration camps. Thus, on August 31, Józef wrote, My beloved Danusia, I'm grateful for everything you all have done for me. I have seen your application regarding the photograph, but you may not send any photograph directly to me. I kiss you and my little Jędruś 1,000 times. One day in the fall of 1941, a guard calls Józef and says, Come with me. Certain he was going to die that day, Józef can't believe his eyes when the guard leads him to the elegant building outside the dreadful camp. The Auschwitz camp commandant sits at the desk. Józef sits down in front of him. The eyes of the two men meet. The commandant watches Józef intensely. "Your number?" the ruler asks. 3088, Józef replies in perfect German. "How long have you been here?" "Since August 1940. "Why did you end up here?" From the street roundup. A series of brief questions ends, and the ruler ponders for a while, snapping his fingers against the desk and observing the prisoner with restrained eagerness. "Your wife sent some photographs here," he says. "As you know, we cannot give you these pictures." He stops and looks at Józef enigmatically. "But I will show them to you," he finishes thought slowly. Józef is in shock. From deep despair his mind shifts to unbearable joy. But he must not rejoice. There must be a cruel trick in all this. That's right, this sadist will now observe his pain and will relish in his anguish. Oh no, Józef clenches his fists. "I'm not going to cry. I won't please you with my pain," he pledges to himself. "Oh God, give me strength for this trial." The ruler takes out a yellowish envelope and slowly pulls out the first picture. In the palm of this barbaric hand, a delicate profile of his heavenly beautiful Danusia, with a little baby in her arms, emerges. Józef gasps. But the moment is short. The cruel hand pulls back the photograph. Józef closes his eyes to hold on to the dearest image of Danusia and Jędruś, to write this image into his memory forever. "Here's another one," the ruler says. A plump big baby smiles to Józef from the fur rug. "Jędruś, my beloved son." Józef bites his lips, his nails cut into his flesh. The ruler puts the photograph back. "Fritz," he calls. "Jawohl," a short fat SS man comes in. "Take his number for quarantine," the master of life and death orders. "Jawohl." Quarantine, quarantine. The word reverberates like thunder in Józef's battered mind. He sends the commandant an inquiring look. Two pairs of intense blue eyes meet again for a split of a second. In that misty window of time, Józef catches a faint flicker of an eyelid. 3088, Józef loudly pronounces his number. Fritz writes down the number, and Józef is out the door. Gradually he regains his sanity and starts putting chaotic thoughts together. Danusia, more beautiful than ever, and Jędruś, such a darling. Quarantine, quarantine. Here it means only one and only one thing: freedom. Pure and simple, freedom. But he is fearful to entertain this thought so as not to flatter or frighten this miraculous chance to survive the death camp. The next day he writes, "My dearest Danusia, I read 1,000 times your last letter about my son, who can already say tia-tia. When my son calls me, it means I have to go home. For this, I'm always praying to God. I have seen your photograph. You look beautiful. Your husband, Józef." In January of 1942, Józef was released from the Auschwitz death and concentration camp. Formally he was free, but for all practical purposes he was still on the SS leash. His discharge certificate from the Auschwitz death and concentration camp contained disastrous conditions. "Until further notice, you must report to the city police in your place of residence," the instruction reads. An additional typewritten order follows. "Report at once to the office of the security police and Gestapo in the district of Warsaw, Police Street 25. In other words, Józef has to report to the Gestapo immediately. As it turns out, Józef has to report to Gestapo every week indefinitely. Moreover, the Gestapo henchmen expect him to report on his family and friends in order to stay free. He quickly realizes that he is in a deadly trap. In the spring of 1942, he decides to stop reporting to the Gestapo and goes into hiding in the countryside. Less than a year later, Józef was shot and killed by the Gestapo on the street in the small town of Radzyń. His body was not returned to the family. By that time, Danuta was pregnant with her second child. She fought a battle of her life with the Radzyń Gestapo to recover the body of her murdered husband and to bury him properly at the Catholic cemetery. This photograph shows Danuta Fijałkowska pregnant with the second child at her husband's grave. 5 months after the Germans murdered Józef, Danuta gave birth to a little baby girl, Elizabeth. The baby was born in the small town of Międzyrzec in eastern Poland. In the 1944 battle for Warsaw, Danuta's home in the old town in Warsaw was completely destroyed by German tanks and bombs. After the Polish Home Army lost the battle for Warsaw, Germans took over the city. On October 9, 1944, Reichsführer SS Himmler ordered the complete destruction of Warsaw. The order was as follows. This city is to be completely destroyed, must disappear from the face of the earth. Stone upon stone should not remain. All buildings must be demolished down to their foundations. On the 50th anniversary of World War II, the Polish Pope, John Paul II, proclaimed a joint decision of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union from August 1939, which sentenced Poland and other states to death, was not without a precedent. It was the reverberation of what Poland's neighbors from the west and east once decreed at the end of the 18th century and had been patronizing to the onset of the 20th century. In the middle of the 20th century, the same decision of destruction and extermination was made once again. The Pope concludes that a system must be created to ensure that the economic and military supremacy shall never lead to the destruction of others and disregard for human rights. For us, the question remains, was the same decision of destruction and extermination made once again in the 21st century? The story of Danuta, presented in my book Growing Up Between Katyn and Auschwitz, encapsulates the drama of Poland in World War II. While Danuta's husband was murdered by the Germans, her father was murdered by the Soviets. The utmost pertinent message of John Paul II that addresses the problem of imperial expansion through genocide is printed on the back of this book. Thank you.